before they get back, I have to wait for Mr. McLaughlin for the roll call, but I'll go over the statement of public notice in your agendas. I'm just going to draw your attention to it. I don't know if there's enough copies for everyone, but if you want to look on somebody else's and share that, we usually don't get a lot of people in the summer. So the statement of public notice says that this meeting was advertised according to the law. There are 2 times during the meeting where there's public comment. The first is public comment on agenda items where you can come forward and talk about anything that's on the agenda or in the presentation. There's a clipboard here. After you talk, you can sign in and tell us your name and address when you come up. And then later in the meeting, there's another public comment for any items that you want to talk about, regardless of whether it's on the agenda. The meeting is being recorded. Just want to point that out. And if it's necessary at the end for the board to go into executive session to use the meeting, we may do that. We already did this flag salute in executive session, so let's do roll call. Am I taking roll call? Here comes Rod. Sorry, Rod. I already did a statement of public notice. Whenever you're ready, we'll do the roll call.
Mr. Byrne.
Here.
Sam.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Mrs. Gray.
Here.
Mrs. Boyd.
Here.
Mrs. Korn.
Here.
Mrs. Wolf.
Here.
Mr. McCarron.
Here.
Mrs. McHugh.
Here.
Madam President.
Thank you. So now we're going to have our presentations. So we have 2 presentations. So we're just going to all get started on that. The first one is updates in elementary school programming. Okay.
Yes, you are. Where are we not in the way? We'll try to work.
Hang back here, Tom.
So while those are being passed out, I'll introduce us and let you know that this PowerPoint presentation will be posted on the district website tomorrow for anybody to review. I'm here tonight, Kristen Fox, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, with 2 of my amazing team, Kathy Spatler and Tom Iziak, to give you some exciting updates about our elementary programming and just kind of let you know some changes that we're happy to share with you. We have 3 areas to talk about: platooning, Spanish, and instructional media and technology. Did I say that right? No.
It's getting a new title.
Yeah, it's getting a new title. Sorry. So I'm going to start with platooning. Platooning is was implemented this year in 5th grade. So if you go back to last June 18th, and you can link to the board presentation that was given June 18th, 2018, we came before you with our plans to try platooning this year for the first time. We've been talking about it for years, off and on for years, and we finally decided to try it. So these were the goals we had last June when we set out. We thought it could improve student transition to middle school potentially, although it really wasn't the primary or most important reason, but certainly getting them used to changing classes, having different teachers, moving around the building might help them in the transition to William N. and in 6th grade. We also thought that if teachers concentrated on the content that's getting more complex, in 5th grade than it was in the lower elementary, they would go more in depth, focus on things that they're more passionate about, and so therefore the students would have a better learning experience. We saw the benefit of kids moving around during the day, not just being in one classroom all day long, and we did think that having different teachers would be just an appropriate step for 5th graders to take, and we thought it was worth trying. Now, when we developed the program, we went with sort of a building-based model, and we let each building come up with their own vision of what this could look like. So it resulted in some differences across the district. This was presented in that presentation, and you can see what those were if you go back to that presentation. But there were some differences in the way they structured their day and some specifics that the kids were experiencing. And so what we did during the year is we met once a marking period to just sort of make sure we were aligned, and we mapped the curriculum, and we talked through the challenges so that we were all on the same page, with the goal of coming to a common program for this year. So we were trying some different things that, in the buildings, but we were going to come to a district model by the end of the year, and we did. So over the course of the year, I just wanted to share with you sort of the common ground we came to, and it's like this list here. There's really 3 or 4 main things that we came to agreement on. One is students are platooning, not departmentalizing. So in at least one of the buildings, the kids were departmentalizing, and the difference there is that, well, platooning, I'll start with that. The kids stay in their class with their homeroom, if you will, and they move together as a class, but they have different teachers. With departmentalizing, for at least parts of the day, the kids could also be mixed up. So they would have different groups of kids in the classes that they went to throughout the day. So we talked about the pros and cons of that throughout the year. And while there were pros, and the Mount Prospect that used departmentalizing loved it, we came to a consensus that we were going with platooning, because we sort of valued the idea of keeping the kids together in their homeroom and retaining that element of the primary grades a little bit longer. So giving them some movement, but not mixing them up too much. So platooning is going to be in, oh, I just lost my pointer, in all 4 buildings next year, and no departmentalizing. The other thing we're agreeing on is the same number of instructional minutes. There was some variation across the 4 buildings, and so next year all buildings will have 50-minute instructional blocks of time in all content areas. The teachers will teach either 2 or 3 subjects, depending on some variations in their building. And there will be an uninterrupted block of reading and writing. There was a little bit variation of that this year, but we agreed that we wanted to keep those blocks of time together, so students would study those in one block of time. What we are working on this summer is some common approaches to back to school night, conferences, how they do report cards. We are working on there's some challenges that we face because the schedule in 5th grade is still a little bit different than K, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're working on the scheduling of the support programs for students in those grades. We're going to continue to look at performance data, because we really haven't had a lot to look at yet in terms of how platooning helped or didn't help students. And so we'll continue to look at that this summer and going forward. So I'm just going to give you a sample schedule. We have either a 5-section model in some buildings or a 4-section model. And this is just an idea of how it will look. If there are 5 classes in grade 5, this is basically how it will look. I left one important piece out. We also agreed that the students would start, the red is a group of students, each color is a class of students. They will start with the teacher and they will end with the same teacher. So you can kind of follow the kids' schedule by looking at the color. This teacher, they'll start here for homeroom, then they'll go to this teacher for reading and writing block, then they will go to this teacher for social studies, and then back to the original teacher for both math and science. So there are 5 teachers, each color-coded, so you can see that this teacher teaches science and reading and writing. This teacher teaches social studies and reading and writing. This teacher has 2 blocks of reading and writing and 1 section of social studies, so there's a few differences. This teacher has 3 math sections and a reading and writing block. And this teacher has math, science, and social studies. They have 3 different subjects. But so the important thing is that the students are having 3 different teachers. They start and end with the same teacher. So they get a few different teachers throughout the day, but they return home to their homeroom teacher to kind of collect their things, make sure they have what they need for the night. And in the 4-section model, it's just a little different. This will be at Oak Street next year, where they have only 4 sections in 5th grade. So it's pretty much the same. The teachers teach 2 or 3 subjects. The kids start and end with the same, and they have a reading and writing block. So at the end of the year, we surveyed the parents, the 5th grade parents, to see how they. We also are surveying the students. We're surveying them in the beginning of 6th grade. So we haven't surveyed the kids who went through platooning this year yet, but we will in the fall. We surveyed the parents at the end of June. So 130 responses. I said 25% of the grade. I think it's closer to a third. But this gives you the breakdown of the schools, and you'll see that we had limited response from Liberty Corner, and that's probably because their model was limited in terms of how much platooning they were doing. But the other schools are closer to evenly distributed. So do you believe your child made strong connections with their fifth grade teachers? Almost 70% said yes. Do you believe your child is prepared for middle school academically? 70% said yes. Do you believe your child is emotionally prepared for middle school? Almost 77% said yes. So then we asked them, what are some of your concerns about going to middle school? We gave them some categories. So time management, organizational skills, I had to cut cases, ability to develop relationships with their teachers, ability to develop relationship with their peers, academic preparation, and other. So, kind of what jumped out at us was that the biggest concerns are still time management and organization. And what we were maybe a little bit worried about was their connection to their peers and their teachers is not as much of a concern. So we kind of took that as some positive feedback. There's still, even concern about academic preparation across the options, because number one is the strongest. So we also allowed parents to give us some open-ended feedback, and so I've categorized them for you in two categories, what they liked and then some feedback on what could be improved. So what they liked was there was a lot of feedback. The one at the top is what was most repeated, that having multiple teachers was a great experience for their children, and we heard that throughout the year as well. They talked about the increased independence as a benefit. In fact, some parents said they could use more independence by fifth grade. Benefits of changing classes, they felt it was more engaging, they really liked having science every day, going more in depth, that they got to see different teaching styles and learn the expectations of different teachers. And some people said that the communication from the teachers was excellent. Some areas of improvement, the biggest one was some parents feeling that there was a decreased connection to that main teacher, that primary teacher. So that was felt by some parents. So at least there were 35 comments, and that was the biggest sort of negative feedback from that group. Some discussion of homework, some it was too much, there wasn't enough, or it was confusing. And there were quite a few comments about how we could communicate better, right? So if the fifth grader now has 3 teachers, how can we communicate, and how does the parent know who to ask questions of? So there was some good feedback that we can take away for how to maybe do that better next year. Some thoughts on the instructional time being too short in one or more content area. Some parents felt that they should change mix up the students as well, but they're ready for that in fifth grade. But I will say more feedback was that they're better off staying with their homeroom, which led us to choose that option. There was a lot of feedback included in here that's sort of unrelated to platooning. So we're trying to parcel it out and take what we can use for platooning. But some comments on math instruction or the level of rigor in fifth grade, maybe they're ready for more or it's too difficult. Give students more responsibility, how we structure the reading writing schedule. So some varied feedback. And one comment about the books being too heavy. So, unfortunately in fifth grade they don't have lockers. Yeah. So they do end up having to do some carrying of the books. So it's certainly something that we could think about. So that's it on platooning right now. I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Stotler and let her talk about Spanish.
Okay. I am so excited to be here and talk about Spanish. I've been in the district about 7 years, and when I came here I was so saddened by the fact that there wasn't a World Elementary Spanish program. We had a Latin program that it had strengths and weaknesses, but I was really interested in seeing a program that brought spoken language into the classroom and had more of an opportunity for students to learn culture of the world today, so they can apply those different things they learn and have a more global perspective. So after some work with, I don't want to surprise you. After some work with our program evaluation a few years ago, I'll show you the goals. It was proposed to the Board of Education that we implement an elementary world language program. Similar in the surveys, we polled parents, students, staff. Spanish was the language that we selected. I believe that it's the right choice for our society today, but also from a staffing position, there are more Spanish teachers readily available than the other less commonly spoken languages in the area, so you have to really balance all of that. The goal is to have just a really nice program for the kids and give them the opportunities to start to become familiar with speaking another language. So After a lot of long meetings in rooms with elementary principals and vice principals, we really kept trying to find a way to make this work without too much disruption from other content areas. Ideally, I wanted it kindergarten through 5th grade every day of the week, and then I said I'll take 3 days a week, and we ended up with 4th and 5th grade twice a week, but I'll take it because I would not take 1 day a week. I didn't think it was worth it. So we're going to try this out for a little bit and see, how the community responds to it. So the way the schedule is going to look is that students will have world language twice a week, and it'll be 30 minutes each session, which doesn't sound like that much, but it's enough to get the kids in, review a topic from the last class, do a new activity, or do a new lesson, a small activity, and then continue on. So this is a sample schedule, and like Ms. Fox said, there are differences in the buildings with how many sections there are, so this is as if there were 5 classes per grade. So the 5th graders will have Spanish at the beginning of the day during their homeroom. So homeroom at the school is used for a variety of different additional supplemental type of activities that we can't fit in the regular school day, so the whole school has homeroom. So once a week, students in the 5th grade will go to the Spanish classroom and they will have a 30-minute lesson. The next block is from 9:20 to 9:50, and that's when they have their specials. So in this situation, they will go to Spanish for 30 minutes, and then they will go to the media center for 20 minutes. And we really thought a lot about this, because we value the media centers in our school, and the kids like going there and getting new books, but we realized that in K-3 it's a lot more important for them to go and have the whole time in the media center. They do a lesson, they learn out different genres, they talk about checking out books and making a real good, thoughtful choice. But we thought that by 4th and 5th grade, the students have those skills, they just need the ability to get in the library and make their choices. So they'll have 30 minutes of Spanish instruction, and then the remainder of the time they'll be at liberty to pick out books. And then the next block is the same. The 4th graders have Spanish as part of their special once a week, and then the other 30-minute instruction is already in their schedule, and that's coming from their current Latin block. So they have a content block where they do social studies, science, and Latin, so that's already existing. So this really wasn't too much of a disruption to the whole building schedule. We just had to find ways to make it work. And this is just an example. If your child's in the A class, they would have it Monday, Wednesday. The B class would be Tuesday, Thursday. I wanted at least one day in between each class to have a little bit more consistency. So we're really happy with this, and I think the students are going to have a really great time. So our goals, which I pulled right out of our program evaluation, the elementary program evaluation from 2015-2016, were to understand and communicate at the word level. We're not by any means looking for kids to come out of here coming home and speaking Spanish to you beautifully. Our goal with any language, with your own children, is really interpretive in nature. We want them to be able to hear a language and start to understand it and be able to negotiate meaning and try and figure out different ways to communicate when they don't necessarily have the words. So we want them to understand and communicate just at the word level. Maybe you'll see some extended chunks and phrases. Identify and recognize memorized words. And then they should be able to respond to learned questions, ask some memorized questions, state some needs, and really develop personal identity through experiences that would occur within one's family, one's community, and the culture. When you look at, I think I put an image on the next slide. This image here is on a lot of the publications that I put out from our department, and this comes from the American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages, and it's called the 5 C's. And this is what we model all of our instruction by. Communication's at the center, that's our goal. But if you look around it, there's communities, comparisons, connections, and culture. So more than just the language, we want students to start to realize how other cultures live and how language is influenced by their culture. So we're really excited about the units that we came up with. We have 4 units planned out. This year, because it's year 1, 4th and 5th grade will do the same curriculum. And then next year, for the next few years, we're going to be having to be revising 5th through 8th grade as the students move up. But next year they'll do the same curriculum. We have 4 units mapped out. 2 of our absolutely incredible Spanish teachers have been working all summer long. I get emails in the middle of the night where they have new ideas and new videos and things they want to share. They're really excited about it. So you can see, we wanted to not just have your typical vocabulary, but we wanted to have a life lesson in it and then teach them about some of the Spanish-speaking cultures of the world. So our first one is called Amigos en Escuelas Latinas, and this will be friends in schools. So this is where they'll learn basic introduction phrases and so on, but they're also going to learn how to be a successful student in the world language classroom. And they're going to focus the culture and the vocabulary in this unit and the school examples from Chile and South America. And then the next one is un cumpleaños, which is a birthday, and we're going to talk about how we celebrate birthdays and how different countries celebrate differently, while learning the vocabulary with that and talking about families, basic my mom's name is, my father's name is, and so on. And they're going to do that by identifying the way it's celebrated in Mexico and other parts of Central America. And then we have Mi Pueblo, which is my town, my community, and we're going to focus on Spain here, and they're doing a big focus on helping others and how you can be a good community member. And also when you're traveling, how you can help others traveling as well. And then the last one is Mi Mundo, which is my world, and they're going to focus on Costa Rica and climate there, and they're going to use animals and vocabulary to talk about the animals that live in the rainforest and how we can work to save the rainforest, and also ecotourism is a fun thing to study when you're doing world languages. So really general topics, but I think that will be, because we're varying the countries, I think the kids will be excited to learn how different people live, and also learn Spanish through that. So then we had to decide, well, when you're only meeting twice a week for 30 minutes, and in November there are conventions and holidays and reasons that sometimes weather, where they might not even have 2 times a week, how are we accurately going to assess them? So we decided with the implementation of the standards-based report cards that aren't quite up 4th and 5th grade yet. For now, we're going to keep the way that we assess similar to all the other blocks, where it's beginning, developing, secure. So that there'll be these 3 statements on the report cards, and they will get one of those 3 letters. And then as the standards-based report cards get pushed up and we see how the program's working, we have an opportunity to change that. But for now, we'll just keep it like the other special areas. But we will have 3 criteria under the Spanish part. And what I like to do is educate everyone. I'm a teacher, right? So I like to have what we're assessing them on in a definition so that parents can understand where we're coming from and what it really means to be proficient in a language. So the students will be assessed on their interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational skills. Interpersonal meaning their ability to communicate back and forth, whether in speaking or writing. Interpretive, their ability to understand spoken or written text, and they usually respond and are assessed on that in English. And presentational is their ability to produce language all on their own with no assistance. So these are 3 targeted areas that we want the kids to become aware of. And as they go up to the middle school, when they take tests, they hear, oh, we have an interpretive today, or we have a presentational today. The students are familiar with this vocabulary. And one thing before I end is I am not trying to make every student want to take Spanish. I was a French teacher, so I want to keep our language alive. But I think the beauty of this program is it's just enough to get them excited about learning languages and realize that they don't have to be scared of it. I find that the later you learn something in life, the harder it is. You put up these natural roadblocks, right? So if we have kids learning Spanish in 4th grade, they're going to realize it's not so scary and I can do it, and that's our goal. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with our language enrollment in grade 6. Are students going to stay here and continue with Spanish, or are they going to say, oh, that was fun, now I want to try another one? So I'm really not too worried about the numbers fluctuating, but it's just something that time will tell. Students, at that age are very easily influenced by their peers. So if everyone in their class wants to take French, that might be what everyone takes that year. If everyone likes to take Spanish, I remember when Ricky Martin was popular back in the day, everyone was taking Spanish, right? So who knows who the next big pop star will be. But I'm excited to see where it takes us, and I'm even more excited to look down the line and see how did this program affect their success and their will they stay in the program longer on? Will we have more students taking senior level languages or maybe multiple languages because we're higher in them now? So I can't wait to come back, hopefully next year around this time, maybe not in the summer, we'll come a little in the spring, and report out on the success of the program and what the feedback from the kids and as well as the community.
Thank you.
Dana?
Very good.
All right, so transitioning now into information and digital literacy. The previous media and tech program, it was really 2 separate curricula. So it worked on this A-B system where they would meet once in media and then the following week in the computer lab. And they would switch back and forth between the 2 locations. What would happen is if you saw the media specialist, during that week the computer lab was available for sign up by the general ed teachers to push in and provide supplemental access to the lab, and vice versa. When the classes were in the computer lab, the media center was available for sign up. So as we were desperately looking for ways to accommodate a world language program, we saw a way to kind of restructure this program and help facilitate that by changing some things. So we are taking two curricula and really pushing them into one cohesive program. So it's no longer media and tech, it is the the information and digital skills curriculum. I've tried to highlight that what they have done is create 3 media units and 3 technology units. All 6 of these will be the same. Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. I'm sorry, 5th grade. All 6 years. We are developing the 6-8 and 9-12 program as well, but those are different. In K-5, the students deliberately get this as part of their special. It evolves, but we are restructuring to align the whole program to follow these 6 thematic units throughout K to 12. Focusing specifically on what we have going on, during the A week at Liberty Corner and Mount Prospect, students will have access to the computer lab, the computer teacher will be there. Flip-flop to that, Cedar Hill and Oak Street will be in the media center. We are doing this because we have reduced staff from 4 computer teachers to 2 in leveraging that A-B week option under a different light. You can see that the A week and B week are really inverted to each other because the 2 computer teachers travel. When Liberty Corner and Mount Prospect have them, obviously Cedar Hill and Oak Street do not, and then vice versa. So that is how we are leveraging that traveling staff. In all 4 schools, the media specialist is always present. So the media center is always available. So you can see that what will happen is that when the computer teacher is present, the media center is still available for sign-up on that off week. We really do believe in giving kids access to the media center at that elementary level to help foster that love of reading, support that ability to conduct research. We really find it to be important. So we made sure that part of that evolving plan was to make sure that that access was continued. I'm sorry, I know I'm standing immediately in your way. I'll try to tuck back as best I can here. So in looking at that structure, K3 is still following that AB 50-minute schedule. It is in grades 4, 5 that we see the most amount of change under this new curriculum because we had to free up minutes for that world language push-in to make everything fit within the confines of the school day. This is an evolving program, and we are looking for how to best leverage the approximate 20 minutes that we're going to have every week with the kids. We are looking at a number of models, partly a co-teacher, where sometimes the media specialist is by themselves and some on the other week they're joined by the computer teacher. We're looking at, do we do that as breakout groups or do we do that as, hey, the media specialist will handle the book selection while the kids are in the computer lab on the computer week. That team is working really diligently and looking at models from across the district. That project is ongoing this summer, so I can't tell you very specifically what we have nested on the best way to leverage that time. But as Ms. Stotler alluded to previously, you're not still teaching a 4th grader to do the finger walk when they're doing book selection. They've gotten that kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. They are secure in picking out an appropriate book. Where that's evolving is really where you see that blended curriculum, and now they're making projects. Are they applying the skills? So when I ask a child to make a PowerPoint or a Word document or to develop something else, are they vetting the resources and using the resources appropriately? Are they applying the skills they've already attained K to 3? So it really is an evolving program. And that really is it in a nutshell for now because it is a work in progress. And I don't have an ability to tell you this is specifically how we're going to do it in that evolving 4-5. I'm also sure, like Ms. Stotler said, when we rejoin you, hopefully in the spring, not over the summer, I'll be able to report out the strengths of year 1 and how we've evolved it now that we've seen it in action for year 2.
Thank you. So that wraps up our update, just to let you know what the changes are for next year, and we will, we welcome hearing from you how it's going, and we'll be back again in the spring to give you more information. I don't know if board members have any questions?
On the tuning section,
Yes.
if possible, if you could go back to the slide that has the 4 sections of
Yep.
the building. So it worries me a little bit that they've got 5 minutes at the end of the day to sort everything else, when in the other buildings, they're gonna be in the room for the duration,
At the end.
yeah. Was that just unavoidable?
Well, I'm not, I don't know, I'd have to think about it to answer your question. We're trying to build in some study hall time, some, ability for them to go see a teacher where they need some extra help and where that might fall. Last year Oak Street had a whole period at the end of the day, so, I can only ask them about it, but I think the idea is for them to come back to their homeroom teacher where there could be an opportunity to, that, like another teacher might have touched base with that teacher to let them know of something that
I'm
student
just
from the
thinking
previous class.
purely logistically.
Yeah, 5 minutes not being
instructionally,
enough.
They're trying to catch a bus, they need to find their coat, I raised 4 of them. They're hard to,
No, I know.
get in gear in 5 minutes when they know they might miss the bus.
That's a valid point, and I'm sure it's all under consideration. One of the things we were trying to do is Oak Street had this block of time at the end of the day, and we were, in working through the core language schedule, trying to get the times the same in all 4 buildings, so that the traveling teacher model could work. It was an enormous jigsaw puzzle.
And they're in proximity generally with those classes.
Oh, yeah,
They're very
they're across the
close.
hall from each other. They're not far away, so if they're here and then they go back here, like they're, yeah.
I totally understand, it's
Yeah.
just that there's 22 of them.
Yeah.
Trying to get through a doorway, to get to a cubby, to get a coat and a
Sure.
backpack, and get to a
Everything's
return
done.
bus.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Tom to elaborate a tiny bit, because a lot of people that maybe here, even the board members, weren't on the board or at the meetings when we talked about when we looked at technology in the classrooms. And I know, like, going back in the day when kids went to the computer lab, that was like the only time they touched a computer all week was when they went to computers and they did their keyboarding. And now there's technology in the classroom. So I know it sounds like reducing computer teachers, but when you look at the technology in the classroom, so I just wanted to ask.
Which is a very valid point, and I certainly skimmed over that. As you noted, back in the day, that was the only time, those were the only 24 to 30 computers in the building. Now we are at a much greater student-to-computer ratio with the amount of Chromebooks that we have available in the K-5 buildings. So most of your students have access on some type of system. Each of the 4 buildings is a little bit different, but they all have a good system of getting technology into the regular classrooms. So the computer lab is really providing, I would say, supplemental instruction, for lack of a better description on that. That's where we're delving into the home row, typing skills, how to create a big part of the digital literacy content is file organization, teaching kids. You're going to make a kindergarten folder, a first grade folder, and then all work. You will then have subfolders and stay organized. So I know as we talk about how student organization was one of the concerns that came out, that is part of the evolving computer program, because we do have kids who already come in with typing and mouse skills, but they might be using what we call hunt and peck, where they're pointing with their fingers. So it's very much an evolving program because of technology access. But like I said, we are really buttoning up how to best house and spiral through those thematic units now, and that's an ongoing project, so I really don't want to say for certain this is the thing that happens kindergarten, first, second, because that team is in action as we speak.
But also in the regular classroom, they have an opportunity to use the Chromebooks with a project in a content area at times.
We're taking board questions right now, but when there's public comment on the presentation system, you can ask your questions in just a couple minutes. Is there any other board members?
So, can you go to the 5, this 5 schedule?
This one.
Yeah, so how are the kids moving in between classrooms? So like, let's look at class 3, right?
Yep.
So they start off in their homeroom, then they go to their special, then they go to the other.
They either go to class,
Right, classroom
teacher
5.
class 5.
Then they go to classroom 4, then they come back to lunch, then they're back in their kind of home base.
Yes.
So are they leaving their homeroom with the books for periods 2, 3, and 4 when they go to their special?
I think that was the nature of the
Okay.
issue that the one parent raised, that they might be carrying more than they should for their age. So, right, with the lack of lockers.
Yeah.
But I also think, like in the social studies classroom, there's a class set in the room. They don't have to take them with
Right,
them.
okay. And then how are the kids moving? Is there like a what's the travel logistics of
I
it?
mean, it's gonna vary in each building. In some cases, they're just going across the hall or next door. And so the teacher's in the hall, kind of like walking them across the hall.
Oh, okay.
There's a teacher with them, and they're not going very far.
Wait, so there's a teacher that walks the class out?
So like, the teacher from class 5 could bring them across the hall, while the teacher from class 3 is bringing them to class 5.
And then the teachers kind of
Yeah.
run back to the class?
I mean, they're a really close proximity.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering about the travel time.
Yeah.
Kind of
I mean,
going
certainly,
back to
that
Karen's
is
point
something
about
we
like,
discuss. We
you know.
definitely discuss travel time and factoring that in, because, you know, kids are kids and they are walking through the hall.
And that kinda
So
goes-
we do talk about that.
which was my sub-point about the 20-minute bite that they're gonna have in either media or tech for the 4th and 5th graders with travel time built in and out. That's gonna be a real tight chunk, right?
Well, part of the rationale there is why so different buildings have different spaces available. In 3 of the 4 buildings, the computer lab and media center are actually adjoining rooms, which does facilitate that co-teaching model I kind of alluded to. It's a little bit different at Cedar Hill, however, with them having the highest technology access and a different computer terminal system, it's kind of buffered out internally. But like I said, we're still developing that. The other side to that was looking at leveraging how we're going to do the world language program and seeing for that to cut down on the travel time, could the world language teacher, the Spanish teacher, teach the lesson in the media center and then just step out and allow the media and tech people to then migrate in without moving the kids at all. It's year 1. We're going to see how it goes and make adjustments. I mean, so until it actually happens, I can't tell you where it is solid and where it needs to be adjusted.
Okay.
One of the things I've heard from the teachers is, like, you might be wasting a little time switching to a different classroom, switching to kids, but you don't, if you're doing science 3 periods in a row, you don't have to put away all the science stuff. Like, if you're a classroom teacher that teaches all the subjects and it's time to be on the science, you gotta make the kids clean it all.
Sure.
Right.
That was one
So
of
you
the
gain that time.
Right, that was
So
one of the
maybe it
benefits of
balances out.
platooning.
Yeah, maybe
For
it
sure.
balances out.
Anybody else?
Okay, so we have our other presentation.
Yes.
I'm just going to keep standing.
Yeah, right.
That way.
Yeah, let me get that.
Yeah. Hey, Kristen,
Yeah.
do you wanna leave that connected? Do you have that other one? Or do I need to switch it? Yeah, it's shared.
Okay, I have to.
Yeah, it's called Bridge High School Master Schedule. If you have it, it's
Yep.
probably the fastest way to do it.
Sure you share it? It's not coming out. Yeah. No, I don't have it.
All right, hang on. Sorry. Do you have an extra? What's that? I have the radar. Yeah. You can try that. For some reason mine's not doing it. Oh, there it goes. Right. Yeah.
Got it. Oh, no, I
You
don't.
got it?
No, I don't. Well, it's gonna take a second. Got it.
Probably 10.
There you go.
All right, thanks. Okay, so thank you all for joining us this evening. We have been working for quite some time at options to make some changes to the Ridge High School master schedule. So tonight, I am joined by our principal, Drew Krause, Mr. Miziak, who's been speaking already, here to talk a little bit about our science efforts within the master schedule. Mr. Fackelman is here as well. So we're going to kind of be tag teaming this a little bit. And our goals tonight are really to kind of review in summary a little bit, because I know that this has been a topic that has been on again, off again for probably the last 4 or 5 years. And so we're trying to kind of bring folks up to speed that maybe haven't had the privilege of attending board meetings where we've talked about this in the past, and also to give you an update on where we are right now. So we're going to start with Mr. Kraus, and if you want to use the clicker, it's right there.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Drew Kraus, Ridge High School. Yeah. Okay. So if you've been to any of the presentations we've had here in the past and board meetings, some of this is somewhat redundant, but let's go through it again. Where we are right now is far left. We have a 9-period day at the high school. The periods are 42 minutes long. You have 8 academic periods with 1 lunch period scheduled. And we serve 5 lunch periods. Now, what we do have with that 9-period schedule is that classes can be scheduled throughout 9 periods. So that allows more variability in terms of room assignments when you compare it to something such as a rotating drop or an alternating A-B day. And so a rotating drop schedule differs in that you're still scheduling 8 academic periods, but not across 9 periods because you have what's called a unit lunch. And in that unit lunch, no periods are scheduled. So now you're scheduling 8 academic classes over 8 periods and not 9. So there's less variability. In the rotating drop, and some call it a double rotating drop, you're scheduling, every day there are 6 periods that'll take place, with 2 that are absent. And then as the next day follows, 2 drop out and 2 more drop back in. So really in a 4-day cycle, you're going to see each class 3 times, okay? Those periods, though, in those 6 periods that appear each day, are longer. They're not 42 minutes. Some vary from 55 to 60 minutes, depending on how much time you're allotted in your building schedule. So each day you're going to have 6 periods of 55 to 60-minute classes, depending on what we could settle on, with a unit lunch in between. I know there's an asterisk down here that said preferred by site visitors. Just by way of a background, during the school year, in late January and February, I took a cohort of teachers and students to 4 different schools. 2 schools that had a rotating drop schedule, 2 schools that had an A-B day schedule. And based on the feedback we got from those visitors, including the students and the teachers, they preferred the rotating drop schedule, but that doesn't mean we're eliminating an alternating A-B day, which is, just to change it up a little bit, again, alternating A-B day is you will have 8 academic classes. However, it works this way. You'll have 4 classes one day on your A day, and then the following day you have your 4 other classes, and that just alternates back and forth. Day 1, let's call it, or A day, you have 4 classes. Those, the following day, do not happen, but your other 4 classes that are scheduled happen the next day. However, those 4 periods that you have each day differ in that they're anywhere from 80 to, some schools have them 88 minutes long. So the block is that much longer to account for the fewer meeting periods, really, that you're having. Again, there's a unit lunch in between where no classes occur. So unlike this schedule on the far left, these 2 have a unit lunch period where nothing happens, no classes are scheduled, okay? So rotating drop 6 classes a day, 8 classes total, alternating A-B day, 4 classes a day, longer periods. So again, this is where we are right now. You have your 9-period day, 42-minute periods, with 5 lunch periods, scheduled periods 4 through 8. And again, you can schedule classes through all of those 9 periods, versus, and this is one I mocked up a while ago, and I'll explain what it means plus 6.4 periods here, but here's what we call a rotating drop schedule. And good, all right. So on this A day, we'll call it, periods 4 and 8 are not in your schedule, okay? And these classes, I think, as I have them, are 58 minutes long. I don't have my notes here, but they're about 58 minutes long, and you have a unit lunch, I believe, which is about 46 minutes. So in your A day, 4 and 8 do not appear, but you're going to classes 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7, on either side of your unit lunch. And those classes are 58 minutes long, if I did the math correctly. The following day, okay, periods 3 and 7 drop out, and now your periods 4 drops back in, as does 8, which was absent the prior day. And you go to classes 4, 1, 2, 8, 5, 6, and it rotates. Because unlike a traditional schedule we have now, you can see that your first period every day is always period 1, right? You have period 1, then 4, then 3, then 2, okay? And even your last period of the day is not always period 9, right? You have 7, 6, 5, and 8. So there's some variability that occurs there. Your C day, again, 2 and 6 are now absent from your schedule, and the remaining ones are in the course, in your caseload. And then D day, let's call it, periods 1 and 5 are absent, and 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 are in the schedule. So again, each of these classes will meet 3 times in those 4 days. What does this mean for 6.4 periods plus? Well, if you do the math, because you do have less transition here in between classes, meaning you're transitioning in a 9-period day at least 8 times, here you're not. So you're actually gaining some time with less transition time. So the amount of time that this adds up to, I think is 410 minutes. When you invoke a rotating drop schedule, you actually gain, and I did the math, 270 minutes of instructional time, which when divided by 42 minutes, is actually you gaining about 6.5 42-minute periods a year. So part of the benefit of a schedule like this type of block type schedule, whether it's rotating drop or A-B day, is gaining instructional time. And that's one of the benefits of it. So in this type of model that I drew up, which isn't effective, this is our starting time, this is our ending time, you're actually gaining time for instruction. Okay. Here's another one I took a look at. I started playing with the numbers. I said if you just added 2 minutes on to the end of the day, you started at 7:35 and you ended at 2:27 instead of 2:25, you wouldn't gain any time net in terms of instruction. But what I did here is I sort of split the unit lunch into 2 different blocks, either accounting for getting every kid a study hall, okay? So for instance, during lunch A and study hall A, if I'm a student who has lunch A, half the school is in lunch A and the other half is in study hall A, and then it would flip for the other half. This can account for, of course, if you can't have the food capacity production that you need, so you can feed half the kids one part of the unit lunch and the other half the other part of the unit lunch, or part of it is also to build in a study hall for students during that, what is now an expanded 60-minute unit lunch to provide for the study hall time. Okay, I mean, and again, you can mock this up any way you want, what works best for your school. This is just something I looked at. Again, same rotating periods, 4 and 8, 3 and 7, 2, 6, 1 and 5 are out. Looking at now, that's a rotating double drop. If you looked at what I indicated before was an alternating day 1, day 2, or A-B day with a unit lunch. Well, here's what it looks like. On your A day, sorry, I'm becoming left-handed now. A day, you have 4 classes here, and they're about, I believe, 84 minutes long. Here's an additional 5 periods. You're going to have some homeroom announcements. A day, let's say you had science, history, math, and elective. The following day on B day, those classes would not appear, and you'd have your other 4 classes, what they would have, whatever they would be. Music, an elective, gym, social studies, that type of thing. So you're still getting your 8 classes, longer blocks with a unit lunch in between. And it just alternates, A day, then B, then A, then B. So every other day you're having that class. I know Mr. Marcari mentioned the fact that this is something that's been talked about probably for the last 4 or 5 years, and this predates me, but I guess these are links here. The first board meeting where this was presented by the former principal was back in 2015, so this has been sort of an ongoing dialogue for a while. followed by a board meeting, which I was part of for the first time, where we did a presentation where I believe some of those slides I just showed you were presented. Followed by, we had a consultant come in, I believe, on December 15th of this last year to talk about room needs and room capacity, and we did an analysis on that, because the long and the short of it is, when you can schedule across 9 periods, it's easier to do versus now scheduling the same number of classes only across 8 periods with either a rotating drop or an AB day. And that's where we run into room capacity issues, and that's what was discussed at this board meeting here. And then I reported out on April 1st about the site visits we did to the 4 schools, 2 with a rotating drop schedule and 2 with AB. I can tell you this, I've said it once, I've said it again, anyone I've spoken to that either has a rotating drop or an AB day, whether they're a teacher or an administrator in those buildings, have said that I would never go back to a straight 8 or 9 period day because of the benefits that they found from having that type of rotating drop or AB day schedule. They've said that uniformly across all the schools we've been at and all the people we've spoken to. And here's why. Things they point out and that we've realized is ability to reallocate time, like I've indicated. You can gain time in your schedule and gain time for instruction. I found one of the biggest things from the site visits that came to me as I sat there and went through all those 4 schools was what I call a sense of calmness in the building, with less transitions where you're not moving every 42 minutes or 43 minutes depending on the school, less people moving around and more time in class. So there was a sense of calmness in the buildings that we had visited that use these type of schedules. Unit lunch, we hear a lot of things from students about, hey, I'd love to eat lunch with my friend because I never see him or her during the school day. Well, during a unit lunch, where everyone's at lunch at the same time, students will have an opportunity to eat lunch with their peers and who they want to eat with. Greater opportunity for teaching and learning in longer periods. So we understand that teachers will have to be have professional development in these models to maybe change their instructional strategies and techniques for the way they deliver their instruction. Because now they've been used to teaching over a 42-minute period. If they teach in a 55, 60-minute block or even an 84, 88-minute block, that's going to take some training. But I think the teachers we spoke to in these buildings have found that they felt it was just so much more beneficial to teach in a block, and they felt like they get more done with less transition time, the kids getting up and down all the time for 9 periods. As I pointed out before, rotation of periods avoids the same periods from being missed. So, you know, every time a kid comes in late, period 1 every day, they're going to sort of cue them out of that class eventually. Or at the end of the day, where we have kids leaving for events, sporting events or field trips or what have you, they're not missing that same period every single day because it rotates. Okay, a rotation of period helps students be at their best in more periods. So again, if I have math every day, period 1, sometimes kids are half asleep during the math class. That won't always be the case, right? They may have math in the middle of the day or at the end of the day. I'm not picking on math, although I was a math teacher. Reinvigorate the building with a new culture. I think it's a good, positive change. Like I said, I think it brings a sense of calmness to a building and a sense of calmness to the students because they're not always up and moving. And that same holds true for teachers, you know, less transition. There's been pointed out that fewer daily preps for students. Fewer daily preps. So if I'm a student, I know, hey, look, I don't have history tomorrow because it drops out of the schedule. If on an AB day, I did history today, I'm not going to have it tomorrow. That gives me time to focus on the classes that I'm going to have that following day. And again, it sort of dovetails into the point below. It's similar to college schedules. Well, yeah, the college schedule, you're not really having the same class every single day at the same time every day. You usually have an every other day schedule or sometimes a once a week schedule. So it's more similar to a college model, the way that the schedule is set up, where students can, you know, have to focus less on 9 different classes, or 8 different classes every day versus some dropping out every other day. And then there's a piece down here, really at the bottom, that talks about equity in time. You know, when you have a schedule like that, all those classes are the same amount of time. You know, right now, again, and I'll refer to phys ed, I mean, we pull students out of phys ed, you know, for their lab periods. In this type of model, well, phys ed will be 57 minutes, or it'll be 88 minutes. So we won't be pulling students out for labs, let's say, so there'll be more equity in terms of time across all the classes. So I think, you know, the benefits are what they are. Like I said, the individuals you've spoken to that have transitioned to these models, whether 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever it was, have uniformly said they would never go back because it's a good thing for themselves, their building, and the students. So this is sort of like the primer for, you know, these guys and what's to come, but this is stuff we've shared out before in other board meetings. Okay? Thank you.
So, just kind of adding on to the why list a little bit more, and of course, we will post the presentation on the website if you want to get back to any of the links from some of the older presentations. There are some more details shown there. We are trying to kind of summarize how we've gotten to where we have gotten, but since we started working on this project, of course, last year we embarked on our strategic plan, and we just wanted to highlight that as an administration, we're really working hard to focus on that strategic plan and follow through with the different ideas that came out of it. We do have it as a 2-year goal, meaning that our strategic plan continues on into our new year, which has started, the 1920 school year. So I wanted to highlight that part of what we really identified was taking a look at schedules and sort of policy and procedure that might help us out with some of our larger objectives. So we talked a little bit about what it is, right? The what being the ability to use a different schedule at the high school. And we talked a little bit, thank you to Mr. Krause, on the why. And so then we get into this question of how, right? How are we going to make this work? Well, one of the things that was just touched on briefly was the fact that we are trying to maintain a similar level of service that we currently have at the school, and that level of service schedules many, many sections of courses across 9 periods because we are scheduling classes at the same time that we're also running lunches. So what we're looking to do is be able to take that same level of service, but essentially squeeze it in, if you will, into one less period or one less opportunity to run the same sections. So that creates and drives the need for more classroom space, which is why we have identified a need here to expand the end of the 700 wing, to add some classrooms, and also to address the issue of food production, because we're trying to produce more food at once. In our current situation, we have lunch starting at 10 a.m., which in and of itself kind of makes you scratch your head, but that's what we've been doing. And we continue serving lunch until 1 o'clock when the last group of students comes to eat lunch. So you have food production going on and on and on and on and on until the last lunch is served at 1 o'clock. Now we need to be able to produce a similar volume of food, but be ready and able to serve it during one period of time, roughly an hour window, say. So we need to be able to have the capacity to do that. And that is the reason for the addition to include a first floor kitchen and servery to be able to produce the necessary food and get it served to the students in a reasonably efficient manner. And as Mr. Krause alluded to, there are different ways to process students during a unit lunch, and how exactly that plays out needs to be carefully thought out with respect to not just producing food, but also the distribution of food. So we have a couple different models that we're looking at to make that happen. But the kitchen servery is key, because if you don't have the food available to the students, you really can't run your lunch. So with respect to the space issue, we're also looking at taking back a classroom from the supervisor's office and resituating supervisors into a different location. The unit lunch would allow us to be able to hold our study halls all day long in the cafeteria space, because there's no conflict between the cafeteria and classrooms running at the same time. Right now, you have the cafeteria being used for 5 periods out of the day. You can't put study halls in there because the kids are in there eating lunch. So we're using, right now, the lecture halls at the high school to run our study halls. Well, if we can keep our study halls in the cafeteria, where the kids have tables to put out their books and do their work, we could take the lecture halls and use them for classrooms. Not necessarily ideal, but it gives you space where if you have a conflict, if you have a pinch, and you need to use those as classrooms, you certainly could do that, depending on the content. Obviously, you're not going to do a physics lab or a biology lab or a chemistry lab in the lecture halls, but some content areas could lend themselves to classes there. So there's an opportunity to pick up some space there. The addition itself we'll take a look at, trying to add on those 4 classrooms, plus the 2 lecture halls, plus this supervisor's office. We think we can get to an additional 7 instructional spaces. The consultant recommended that our target be between 5 and 10 more classrooms in the building in order to make this schedule of 8 periods work. Obviously, the goal is to maintain existing programs and have a similar level of food service as now. So here is a schematic. The current design, the exact specifications of this space are being worked on now, working with our architect and our engineers, as well as some kitchen consultants and our food service providers. We have to figure out the best way to utilize this box of space. The second floor, pretty straightforward. The white represents the end of the existing 700 wing. Okay, these classrooms in white are already there. This just shows that going beyond that, there's an extension out that would add essentially 4 more classrooms, pretty much carbon copies of the existing end of the 700 wing. There is a small instruction room planned here as well. So you're picking up 4 full-size instruction rooms and a smaller space here that could be used for small group instruction or perhaps a teacher workroom space. So the estimated cost, including the soft cost of this project, is about $6.8 million. The funding would occur through capital reserves that already exist and a short-term 5-year loan to manage the difference. Now, obviously, these are estimates. That's what a budget is. It's a budgetary estimate. And as we get closer to actually bidding and awarding, finalizing drawings, obviously that could adjust a little bit up or down, which is why down here, when we talk about the loan payments, we're giving ourselves a window, and this represents what it would take in an annual increase to our school budget. So we're looking at between $182,000 to $282,000 on the higher end as an increase to the annual budget to handle this short-term loan. Now, obviously, we are looking at making this part of our budgeting process for the 1920 school year. So as we get into the late fall and the winter and we start doing our budget process, obviously the goal would be to make this as small as possible when we work out the budget for 1920. And our goal is to get this number as low as it possibly can be. But at the same time, we certainly don't want to fall short, so we're looking at this possible range in the budgeting process going forward. So I was asked the question, talk about how could this be possible? Could we do this alternative master schedule at Ridge High School without doing the addition to Ridge High School? So I want to address that point because, in short, I don't think we can. And the reason is simply because of the food production issue and the classroom space issue that we've talked about. I don't think that's a realistic undertaking. We could still do the same thing with relocating supervisors to gain a classroom there, and we could still do the unit lunch and pick up those lecture halls for instruction. But keep in mind that if we do that unit lunch without the additional food production capacity, it's kind of a deal breaker. You're saying, yeah, it could be done in concept, and you could get those classrooms, but how are you going to produce the food when you go to that unit lunch and you only have an hour to cycle everybody through and distribute food. So that's a major stumbling block. The other issue is that, keep in mind that we have a classroom space issue. You're taking 9 periods and squeezing them into 8 periods. So if we don't have enough classrooms and we still need to offer the same content to the students, and we run out of classroom space, but the kids still need the class, what are you gonna have to do with the students that need the class, but you're out of classroom space? You're gonna have to jam them in to other classes. So that's gonna push your class size up. You also might have less ability to offer the same number of sections that you're currently offering, which could mean that you don't have some electives that the students are currently used to having. So I wouldn't advocate for less for the kids. I don't wanna see us having to take away electives or raising class size. So for me, this is a problem to try to go about doing. I wouldn't recommend even trying to do this. But I want to answer the question as to why I feel that way. So, one of the other issues that has come up is we've been talking a lot about rotating drop schedule and some about the A-day, B-day schedule. So, well, what is it, right? What do you want to do? Do you want to do this one? Do you want to do that one? So I think that, as Mr. Krause alluded to, everyone that we visited, and this speaks not only to the site visits that Mr. Krause did, but also to the site visits that were done when Mr. Hallett was principal, was very similar feedback. We really love the new schedule. We wouldn't go back to an old traditional schedule, right? So the question is, why are we still talking about both, I suppose, right? Well, I think both represent good alternatives. As Mr. Krause said, the team that he took out in January to look at 2 A-day, B-day schools and 2 rotating drop schools, the group of people that went on that visit preferred the rotating drop schedule. But to be fair, that obviously wasn't all the teachers or all the kids. We took a few kids and a handful of teachers to look at these schools. So we got input from that group of people. The other issue that we know we're dealing with is actually making the schedule. So as soon as humanly possible, our team is going to be working forward to start by trying to make a rotating drop schedule. Meaning in our student information system, which is now Genesis, we're going to actually try to schedule this first. But what I want to highlight is that we have this as another option in our minds. So as we go forward in trying to actually put all the widgets together, or the puzzle pieces together, it may be that we see solutions falling out in this schedule that are not going to work in this schedule. So we kind of have this in the backs of our minds. We know that that's a possibility. We also want to talk to the staff more about all the issues. We want to talk to students, and we want to talk to parents. So as we go forward in the fall, people are back in town, we want to have some nights where we can get together and just talk to people about the pros and cons of different things. So we want to do that when the school year gets started. The addition. Well, you know, if you're not so sure about this, why are you doing the addition? Because we know that in either of these schedules, right, we're talking about 8 periods for our students in 8 periods to schedule, not 9. So either of these schedules requires the same facility needs. Okay, we still would fall short on classrooms. We still want to do the unit lunch. We still need to raise food production capacity. We still need to have classroom space. Okay? So as I noted, we want to start with the mock schedule for the rotating drop option and keep the A-day, B-day alternative in mind as we're trying to manage the challenges. Because know that, you know, as you work through, we want to solve the problem with the best possible mousetrap at the end of the day, all things considered. And so what I asked Mr. Miziak to do was to come and talk a little bit about giving you an idea as to why there are challenges, right? What is an example of a challenge that has us thinking about, well, what would be the best way to deal with an issue going forward? So a sample challenge or a sample issue that could make you think about both schedules is related to the way that science classes are currently run at Ridge High School. So with that said, we're on this slide, and Mr. Miziak's going to talk a little bit about one challenge in science. Mr. Fackelman's going to talk about the challenges in music, and I feel like I've kind of beat lunch to a pulp at this point, so I won't hit you anymore with that, but Mr. Miziak's going to tackle the science issue a little bit. Sure.
So what I have here is an example student schedule under our current 9-period system. So what you can see is that once a week for our CP Conceptual, CP Mathematical, and Honors Level classes, a student has an extended lab period. They're shown on Monday, highlighted in green. Earlier, Mr. Kraus kind of alluded to it, that we do pull, when possible, our labs out of that PE. You can't do it more than once in a 5-day cycle, or you fail to provide the legal number of minutes needed in PE per week. So we do that there to kind of allow the student to take as many classes as possible. If you give a count on our 9-period system, when you take lunch out, you drop to an 8-period system. This student is taking 8 different academic classes with a single extended period for science on Monday. This puts an immense amount of constraint upon our ability to use rooms and run a master schedule. I want to elaborate on that. This is a snapshot of room 302, predominantly an AP biology room. This is the room usage for this fall coming up. It's actually a combination of 2 different teachers using that room, because based off of the lab periods and number of contact periods, science teachers teach 4 lab classes. Here you see 6 classes in that room. So one teacher has 4 classes in that room, another teacher has 2 classes in that room, their other 2 classes are elsewhere. 6 is the absolute maximum that you can get because of what I call dovetailing. Here you see that periods 1 and 3 are sharing 2, then you see that 4 and 6 have to share 5, and that 7 and 9 have to share 8 in order to stack all of those classes in there. Something else I want to point out is something called flipping the classroom. I have 2 different courses running in this class.